Yeah, I'm down here with Dudley Biddlecomb. Dudley started fooling with shells and trying to get natural strike on them, and has been recording it for several years here now. How long you been doing this, Dudley?
Well, I've been fooling with oysters ever since I could walk. But this particular experiment, I'll call it, started about 10 years ago. And I read a newspaper article, a press release, and this man's opinion was the problem with the Chesapeake Bay oysters was they were not reproducing. And so I really couldn't see that oysters had stopped doing what comes natural to them. And maybe we need to do some research. But we started out and we needed to recover the same shells that we put out. And we started out with chicken wire bags, and then this particular cage right here with no legs on it, I made these up, and I could put probably a bushel of shells in it, drop it overboard, and I was still working on tugboats, didn't have a lot of time, and I'd come back weeks later and pull it up, and well, we found some strike. And then Doug McMahon said, you need to go a step further. You need to put legs and get that thing up off the bottom. So as this thing progressed, and we just take shells that, you know, old oyster shells from season before, and you need to pile them up on the hill, let them season out, and then not only that, before you put them back overboard, you take a fire hose or something and you wash them, clean them up, clean them up. And it's known that you get more spat on clean shells. For instance, there's some dirt left in that. You don't want an oyster that's fresh out the house because that's got old dead meat in it and all that. So over the years, we finally got this thing down. I guess I'm retired and I got more time. And so now the last 4 or 5 years, we have put clean shells in a cage that holds probably about 2.5 bushels. It's on legs, and we put them out. We start late May, and we start putting them things every 5 days, and then you put a number tag on each cage and write that information down. I've got a book here full of Waterman's shorthand. Nobody can read it but me, and I later put that over on in better form.
Well, these are some you put over last year.
Right. Now these were put out early last year. I think these probably went out late May or early June, and we had an early strike. So, but anyway, they've got, I don't know, some of them 8 to 10. In past years, I've seen as high as 30 strike on a shell that's put in these cages. So back in 2008, we were putting cages out and clean shells. We were taking the same shell, the same day, handled the same way, cleaned up, and putting actually on the bottom. And that particular year, we were getting from 12 to 30 strike per shell. And on the bottom, you were lucky if you would see one spat to every 5 to 8 shells.
That's a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get up in a water column, as you look over here on these piling, oysters strike on your bulkhead and your dock and all that.
Yeah.
But they don't strike on the bottom. And I honestly believe another thing of it is that you put shells out in these cages, and in 5 to 8 days, they've gotten so much slime or marine growth on them, nothing will strike on them. And you've got to have clean shells, and part of this experiment was hopefully monitoring water temperature, salinity, and what else, and I've had some help from VIMS, and we need to know if you could come close to say what day oysters in the area were going to spawn, even if it happened 4 or 5 days ago. You've got 2 weeks before those oysters are actually going to set. So my theory was, if you could figure that out or come close, you can move a lot of oyster shells in 2 weeks. You know, in a way, if you just dump them on the bottom or whatever.
Yeah. You said that it looked like that you wouldn't do anything until your water got to be 72 degrees.
72 degrees is about a benchmark. You can,
yeah.
Yeah, you can watch it. You want to start checking that water temperature. I checked it this morning. It was up to 61 a week or so ago, but now it's back down to 56. But yeah, you won't find anything, and really probably about 74, 75 degrees. Now, if you have a sudden spike in water temperature, it looks like that encourages the oysters to spawn. And of course, they're going to spawn and float around and whatever they do. And if you've got clean shells available, you can get some catch, and you can get a lot of catch. Of course, this is kind of a limited, this wouldn't be a real big operation. But it goes back to that newspaper article, that the oysters are doing what they're supposed to do, and they are reproducing, but they need some help.
Yeah, I mean, we see that around here all the time. We see more oysters on piling and on bulkheads than we see on the bottom.
Yeah.
I mean, they're doing that.
I've got a friend over on Ellis Creek, and he got to fool around with oysters on his dock. But he'd come down here every 10 days and buy a bushel of oysters from us during oyster season. And I got to tell him about this. And so he had time on his hands, and he started putting out cages with shells. Well, then, of course, he was getting some hatchery seed too. And anyway, that's been, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago. I said, Brian, you must be having success. He says, well, I am. He, what makes you say that? I said, because you don't buy no more oysters from me anymore. Right around his bulkhead and his dock with cages, and of course he gets some hybrids, triple O's and all that. But it doesn't take much encouragement to overcome whatever the problem is with getting natural strike the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
For years, all we had to do was buy shells, put them overboard. We'd put them overboard in May, because that's when we had the labor to do it with. And
you got strike back then.
Got strike,
too.
and in 3 years' time, you'd be catching some of them.
Yeah.
It would just, clean up an area, put shells down. Very seldom we bought seed. We always did over shell. And this area would be growing, and they'd have an area that was 3 years old. You start tonguing, you'd have to transplant. They'd get so thick, and that was a regular thing. And our lease has been in the family for over 90 years. I can remember when, just estimating, I figured my daddy would haul 2,000 to 3,000 bushels out of there to Crisfield, not counting the ones he sold around here.
Yeah, I heard stories about how your daddy would take your buy boat and put it right over there, and they would load her right down.
Yeah, 3 days he'd have a load of oysters. Now, he was careful how many he put on, because he wanted to be able to go across the bay in bad weather. That's when the market was best.
Yeah.
But that same area now, if we caught, well, some of it's gone, erosion has covered it up. But that same area now, if we catch 350 bushels over in a year, man, we think we've done something.
Yeah.
I mean, about 10%, and that's the story everywhere. And we didn't kill that oyster shore. We didn't overharvest it. I mean, we did everything but that. But when the oysters disappeared in the 60s, people that the good, bad, and ugly all
fell into it.
Yes, sir.
That's right. Oh, Dudley, you've said this, and I've heard it all my life. That it looks like when an oyster spawns, they all spawn.
Yeah, they pretty well proved that. And a man told me over on the Eastern Shore a couple of years ago, and he had hatchery, and he was watching them on, they call it the table and all that, and he said, well, things are getting close. He said, nothing's going to happen for a few hours. He said, I'm going to the house and eat me a snack. And he said, that was all right. He said, I made a mistake. I sat in my recliner. And he said, when I woke up, he said, 11 o'clock news was on. And I jumped up and run down to the hatchery, and it had already happened. He said, yeah, if one spawns, then that triggers the rest of them, and they all spawn.
Yeah. And something that, and I can't understand why they haven't tried this, but it looks to me like, just like that man that had the hatcheries, he had those oysters in a controlled environment. I mean, I can't understand why as a replenishment program, we don't go ahead and get the seed, I mean the shells, and have it ready and have it on boats, and then wait until you having those oysters on in that controlled environment, say here on the Great Wacomico, or you could be on the Pianca Tank or any river, but when that oyster starts to spawn and they all spawn, it looks to me like that would be the time to take the shells out and put them over.
That was right. And I always heard, I've never been able to follow up on it, I always heard that the state of Delaware at one time, they were doing a program like that, and I think in Connecticut they used to do it, and they would hold their shells. I know in Connecticut they did it. They would hold their shells until the experts told them, all right, it's likely to have a spawn, you know, this week or something like that. And then they would plant their shells. I'll tell you something else they'd do. If they didn't get a strike, they went back and dredged them shells up and brought them back shore. Used them another time.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're a valuable commodity today.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, I mean, we've got to take better care of our shells.
We used to have 15 to 20 bushels of shells every year piled up on this property, ready to go overboard. And because you had to buy them when and where you could get them. It's unusual to see a pile of shells anywhere now with 20,000 bushels in it.
Yeah,
You know,
that's right. Yeah.
oyster houses would get so many shells years ago that they'd give them to you if you take them away.
Yeah, well, I
Get
tell
more
you,
space.
that too, but it used to be too that, I mean, there was so many oyster houses and a lot of people just shucked in 5-gallon cans.
Right. Oh,
And
yeah.
what they had for profit at the end of the year was selling that shell pile.
That's right.
You know,
That-
because they
that's-
didn't
that's
have that.
part of the business.
Yeah, that's right.
It certainly is.
Well, listen, we're going to